Welcome to In Front of Ira.
We're Sabrina.
And Torsten.
Two historians.
And friends.
And lovers.
Of romantic comedies.
And this is the podcast in which we answer the age-old question.
Will they or won't they?
Is it or isn't it a romantic comedy?
Technically, that's two questions, but I'm going to give both of us a pass on that because we're going to do a movie that has so many stories that it doesn't even matter.
That's very true. And also, this is season 2. Somehow
Welcome.
We produced a whole first season of this. This is season 2. If you've been with us the whole time, welcome back. If not, welcome in. Go back to the old episodes.
Listen and welcome all you Starbucks lovers.
Exactly. We're gonna start because we will start on Valentine's Day. I hope this is true. If it's 2 days later, sorry. But it will be the week of Valentine's Day, and we're gonna talk about the film Valentine's Day.
We are so creative. This is why they pay us the big bucks.
0. I don't know how we're gonna get into this.
The thing that I did, just kind of like is because I really tried to figure out how this movie is paced together. And so like I just went kind of like through it scene-ish by scene. I didn't put all the scenes and like tried to take out like the stories so like we can see the stories. So I guess we can just kind of start with like the main stories that are happening in this movie, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure we have to go through all of them. So what you need to understand about this film is that it's sort of like Love Actually, that it's this piecemeal thing of like we have all these little stories of all these people, which may or may not interconnect. I think one of the main ones that we start off with is Ashton Kutcher, who's a florist, who gets engaged to Jessica Alba at the very beginning of the film, which obviously means they won't be together by the end of it. Like, that's sort of the rule. If a rom-com starts with that, you know that's not what the story is going to be for them. That it's just going to be happy.
Right. Then that's our first story. This is kind of like an important... This is kind of the story... Ashton Kutcher is kind of the character that we follow around the most, I would say, of all of them.
I think
because he kind of like frames everything.
Because I think what's actually not the worst plot device for the setting of Valentine's Day is that there's flower deliveries, and they end up delivering a bunch of flowers all over the city, and that glues some of that together. So that's also why him being a florist makes sense for him to be a character we follow around.
Yeah, it's a very Valentine's Day themed movie. It's people have, I guess, at least he has a job that's kind of related to Valentine's Day. He and George Lopez, who works with him. Okay, so we have Ashton Kutcher and Jessica Alba. That's kind of our story number 1. We have Jamie Foxx, who is told by, I think it's Kathy Bates, that he's a sports reporter at LA's sports network thing, and he's the number 2
TV, I think, I guess.
PTL something,
like local
whatever.
Television. It's not like he's not with anything.
It's not huge. And he's the number 2 sports reporter, which is why he also has to do human interest stories, which he doesn't like to do because he likes to do sports stories. And he gets sent to do these, and that's kind of also a little bit of a framing device here. And then we have Jennifer Garner, who I wrote down is a Hallmark type person. Like, she seems the most Hallmark right now.
Yeah, she's a primary school teacher. She's Ashton Kutcher's best friend. She's sleeping with, dating, she thinks she's dating, Patrick Dempsey, who we've talked about before, and I think I want to come back to this, who turns out is cheating.
He's a heart surgeon, which
he's
is
a heart
like
surgeon,
so
and obviously but it had to be a heart surgeon because it's Valentine's Day, but also, I mean, at this time, he was on Grey's Anatomy for a while, so everyone knew him as, like, Dr. McDreamy from Grey's Anatomy, but he goes against type because, as it turns out, he's a lying, cheating bastard who is, in fact, very much still married, and, you know, is cheating with Jennifer Garner, so...
Right. And then we happen upon Topher Grace with the weirdest hair I've ever seen him with. For some reason, it looks like a hairpiece. Doesn't he just have
normal hair?
I don't know. It looks like it's too solid. kind of like a Ken doll.
I don't know. I didn't notice that at all.
And Anne Hathaway, who are recently dating, I think. And we
I
just
think
kind of
that's actually their first night together, and they wake up after that. And she, as it turns out, is a sex worker, which, you know, this film is by Gary Marshall, which we have to come back to as well in big ways, because it's constantly being referenced that he's obviously the director of Pretty Woman. She's a phone sex worker, so, like, I guess it's not quite Pretty Woman, but I think that's probably why the story is in there. And also, speaking of Pretty Woman, even Julia Roberts herself is in this film. She's a soldier flying home for just one day. And is sitting next to Bradley Cooper on a plane, which
is one of my kind of more favorite stories in all of this. Fun fact, at least according to IMDb, Sandra Bullock was supposed to be the Julia Roberts role, which is strange for a Gary Marshall joint.
I always figured she had to be in there, but maybe there was an idea of having her play someone else. I don't know. And definitely my favorite story is there's a football player, like American football player played by Eric Dane, who was also Grey's Anatomy, who is, there's sort of rumors, is he going to retire because he's 35, which for the sport is obviously old. And as it turns out, the big press conference he's going to do is not about him wanting to retire. It's about him coming out as gay.
Which we probably should have said, spoiler alert, because that is literally the only thing that I thought was genuinely surprising in this movie. We have Shirley MacLaine and Hector Elizondo, who also has to be in a Gary Marshall movie, as a couple. They're kind of like a sweet couple, and they are kind of babysitting a younger kid who we later learn is Julia Roberts' kid that she's flying home to.
That's their grandchild.
Yeah, it's their grandchild, right? And then we meet Taylor Swift, who is in the elevator with Jennifer Garner and a giant teddy bear in like a very odd scene, which is kind of sets her up as this likable airhead in this storyline.
So there's a bunch of high schoolers. One of them is Taylor Swift. And she has a boyfriend, it's Taylor Lautner, who, and obviously at the time they were actually dating in real life, Taylor and Taylor. Because we should say this film for, like, impossibly is already, 24 years old. So Taylor Swift
No. It came out in 2010. Like, it may feel like 24
years old. Yeah, it's
like
been
it feels
84
that
years.
way.
No, 14 years old, and that's why what tripped me up, because I wanted to say she's 20 when this film comes out. So obviously she's still believable as playing a teenager. And I mean, she was famous already, but she wasn't quite like Eras Tour Taylor Swift famous as she is in 2024. We have, of course, the airplane with Bradley Cooper and Julia Roberts. We have the other high schoolers that are Emma Roberts, Julia Roberts' niece, and her boyfriend, who I don't know.
I wrote it down somewhere. Cal something.
I think that's. Do we have most of them now?
Carter Jenkins, sorry, not Cal. Carter Jenkins.
Jessica Biel is an agent, like she is Eric Dane's sports agent, the football player, sports
publicist,
agent.
she calls herself,
or
right?
Or publicist. And ends up with Jamie Foxx because he's a journalist at the press conference, etc. So some of these things obviously then connect.
And
in all these
she's
ways.
the one who hates Valentine's Day and is having an anti-Valentine's Day party like every Valentine, to which nobody RSVPs on Valentine's Day, and then
a bunch of people do show up. So it's this kind of film where a lot of these things tie together, and it's crammed full of incredibly famous people. I think the reason why so many people agreed to do this is because most of them will have not had more than 1 to 3 days of shooting.
Yeah.
It's set in LA, so it is filmed on location in LA and in studios in LA anyway. which makes it a lot easier to get someone like Kathy Bates or Shirley MacLaine to show up, because it's literally here. This is this is one work day, and we're gonna pay you $5 million.
Two days to be in the next Love Actually, basically.
And it's Gary Marshall knocking on your door, which again Julia Roberts would have always said yes to him.
So there's two more people that I want to mention, because like one of them I just completely has one scene that she kind of steals with Emma Roberts, which is Kristen Shaw, who is like, I think, a teacher or something.
She's a teacher at the high school. Queen Latifah. We forgot about Queen Latifah, who is Anne Hathaway's boss. Yeah. Who is
Anne Hathaway's boss. And there is George Lopez, who is a delivery driver.
Yeah, he's a co-worker. Like Ashton Kutcher's.
Kutcher's. And that's kind of the cast. Oh, and there's the kid. There's the kid is
grandchild that turns out to be Julia Roberts' son, and he's in Jennifer Garner's primary school class and has a crush on his teacher.
Right. And, he's basically the Thomas Brodie Sangster of the piece. He's Bryce Robinson, who wasn't in many other things, but is quite believable as this.
Yeah, he's cute.
Kid.
So like, what's really, I mean, I know we usually talk about reviews later in these episodes, but what is striking to me is that on Rotten Tomatoes, this film has a whopping, I think, 18%, which is mostly the critics, like for the audience, and then also the IMDb score, that's usually an audience score. It's like a 57, it's like the typical sort of...
It has, I think, the
mediocre,
typical 5.7.
Yeah, it has exactly that. And I think like I've actually seen this a bunch of times. I actually saw it in theaters in 2010. And I've kind of gone back to it because like I don't think it's the best film ever made, but I also really don't believe it's a 18% Rotten Tomatoes film in any way.
I actually disagree with you there. I think it tries to be Love Actually, and I think where Love Actually is super problematic, as we've discussed, it actually has something to say, and this is just, how about we double the number of stories and put a bunch of famous people in there? There are two things about this movie that I really, really liked. And the one of them is the story around Eric Dane and Bradley Cooper, because that's unexpected and comes, and I'm like, oh, really? Because I thought this was just going to be like white, straight people having Valentine's Day. And the other one is the story that actually isn't a real story. It doesn't have like a real dramatic arc, which is about Taylor Swift and Taylor Lautner. And mostly because Taylor Swift is genuinely funny as this kind of like airheaded teenager who poses for the camera and has to say that she's not a cheerleader, but she's on the dance team. And it's kind of, there's kind of like iconic lines coming out of that. And I really love that.
And I mean, so there's a review in The Guardian by Sadie Doyle who's like, this is the worst movie ever made. There's no beginning and no end. This is a cycle of pain from which there is no escape. And I mean, the review is genuinely funny, but I also do think it's very mean-spirited. I mean, I get that it's not the next Love Actually, but it's the kind of film that I do want to put on if it's Valentine's Day. And as per usual, I'm sitting by myself at home because I don't care about the holiday. I've been single for most of them, and it's just, I want to sit at home and watch a movie that will not offend me and will entertain me for 2 hours, and I can eat chocolate. And like, that's kind of exactly what it does.
I mean,
like,
it does that.
Does that, but I don't think that warrants 18%. It warrants the typical 57, whatever.
No,
and it's true
I disagree. It's a bad movie. That is my conviction. That is my conviction. We're not usually like not on the same page about these things. I saw this literally the first time yesterday, and I just did not understand why this movie exists, except for Love Actually existing.
I mean, Gary Marshall wanted to make an American version of Love Actually. That's why it exists. And I mean, I get that doesn't yield the best results. I mean, the screenwriter is a woman, which surprised me, because even in this genre, in the newer versions of these sort of mediocre, it's not always women writing them. Her name is Catherine Fugati. I don't know how to correctly pronounce her name. Sorry, Catherine.
It's like
and then
Italian.
co-writers Abby Cohn and Mark Silverstein. but Catherine, like one of the only other things she wrote is Happy New Year, which is when they tried to do this again, and that one was atrocious. That one, I agree, is a 10%.
So what I did is when, oops, I'm peeking for some reason here.
You're peeking. No, you've not peeked yet.
Yeah, no, just audio wise. The thing I did, because we need to talk about how Netflix removed this movie from Netflix just before Valentine's Day. Like,
at least in Germany. I mean, I don't know.
Apparently it's been, I looked it up because I'm an idiot looking these things up, and apparently like what happened twice already is that they removed it like in January of a year and put it back in August.
March.
Yeah, kind of like around that. It's the weirdest fucking thing.
I do remember watching it on Netflix because this is how one year I remember it was like, oh, I might as well. I mean, I have a disc, so it might have just been that. But I do think one time they managed to have it on there.
It was on there because I downloaded it on my iPad to watch on the train, and literally last week it was still on there. I didn't watch it on the train, and now I had to.
It's a ploy.
I had to buy this stupid movie, so. I bought it in a had to rent with Happy New Year, which...
Oh my God, that's like, I mean, to be fair, I've not seen Happy New Year. I also saw Happy New Year in theaters, and it was atrocious, and haven't seen it since. And I don't know, maybe it's just that I've seen Valentine's Day at least 5 times, so it's sort of grown on me, but it's true that I think I probably stick around for... definitely gay footballer comes out storyline, because like unfortunately that has not actually really happened in the NFL, nor in any other football in the world, especially not someone who then makes a defiant stand to say, no, I'm gay and I'm here to play, because usually when people come out, it's when they retire. And they do connect that, but then defy sort of that idea, which I like. And then the big reveal at the end that he is Bradley Cooper's partner, which again for 2010 that wasn't really happen. I mean, we've talked about this. It doesn't happen in rom-coms at all. Love actually was supposed to have that one lesbian storyline that was cut. So and I mean, they're not nobody, right? Again, Eric Dane was in Grey's Anatomy, or had just left. I forgot when he left Grey's Anatomy, like year-wise, but like he was the other hot guy on Grey's Anatomy, and they're both in this, and they're both playing against those types, and I think that is an achievement, at least of this film, that Patrick Dempsey gets to play an asshole, and Eric Dane is like, hey, I'm gay. And I'm a football player, and I'm also dating Bradley Cooper. And I mean, I think Bradley Cooper in 2010 is also different from Bradley Cooper in 2024, when he's trying to win an Oscar for the 5th time in a row so badly that he made a bad film about Leonard Bernstein. But I think it's still a thing. And the other storyline I like is, I do genuinely like Julia Roberts, because we obviously supposed to think she goes home for 24 hours to see a man. But as it turns out, she's the little boy's mom, and she just wants to see her son, and doesn't even have a lot of time.
Which I kind of like. I think that was let's put it like that. I didn't fall for that. I kind of like, it became very clear to me that was what was happening, despite all the kind of supposedly flirtatious energy between her and Bradley Cooper. I also didn't really think that was going anywhere, and we see why. But I really did think that their storyline, they have chemistry. They have like not necessarily romantic, but they have like comedic chemistry, which is genuine and which is funny. Like, they're fun to watch together.
Yeah, Julia Roberts is just good in anything, and they're just put as good actors, and I think, and I mean, she's good enough that she can make us believe in this one bit, and then, you know, in that sort of emotional sincerity of having this one scene with her kid, and. Yeah, I mean, I like some of the meta stuff of like Shirley MacLaine at the open air, like this cinema.
They go to like Hollywood Forever Cemetery,
which doesn't do screenings in February. They do them in the summer. But like, it's young Shirley MacLaine is in the film. And I think it's sort of implied that the character's supposed to be an actress, which, I mean, we're in LA, so it makes sense. But I think it's just a nice sort of meta bit of having that.
They like then her and Hector Elizondo have a falling out, and then kiss at the cemetery, basically replaying the scene of the movie that's behind them, which is a sweet moment.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, their falling out was very odd. Like, she admits that she had an affair years back, and then he walks away, and it becomes like it's played as this really big emotional moment, and it really just feels like, you hurt me, you didn't like, you didn't tell me, like, this is obviously a bad thing that happened, but also it just didn't feel earned enough to be that big moment. This is my general problem with this movie, and despite, like, I didn't like mind watching it. When I say, like, that I understand 18, I don't think it's an 18% movie. I think it's a movie that really tried to be something that it didn't achieve to be. It is the most competently made multi-plot romantic comedy. Like, it's even more, like, in terms of the way that it's put together, seems even like better put together than Love Actually. I just don't think it had anything to say. And the reason, I think, is because I said I looked at all the storylines, and I came up with interacting. They're a little bit different numberings you can come up with, but I came up with like 14 core stories that this thing has, and Love Actually has 8. And as we know from Love Actually, 8 is a lot.
Yeah,
and so
8
14
is a lot of legs, David. 14 is a lot.
14 is a lot of storylines, Gary.
I think it's just like Richard Curtis had 14 and then was wise enough to cut some of it, and then Gary Marshall was like, no.
Like, I think what Curtis did is he cut storylines and not the runtime, because he all of them were in the big edit, and then he cut the storylines out. And what Gary Marshall did was he cut the storylines down so that each of them is shorter. And that's my fundamental issue with this movie. I don't really care about most of these people. Like, we've named the storylines that we like, and again, like, the ones that I like the most are the ones that are literally in like 1 or 2 scenes. You get Bradley Cooper and Eric Dane, and you get the Taylors, who don't even really have a story, who are just kind of like genuinely fun to watch. And to me, that's just, it's slightly unfortunate.
I also really want to defend Taylor Swift in this, because again, also that review that hated it so much is like, she is the worst film actress of all time.
No.
I'm like, that's not true. She's brilliant. If you've
great in this.
If you've ever seen her like in real life, she's fully playing, obviously she's playing a version of herself to a degree, especially at 20 years old, when she was this like pop starlet who was just starting to get really big. And everyone's assumption of her is obviously she's a blonde airhead, and she's like playing this to the nth degree. And it's, I think she's like, she knows where the jokes are, and she's making, there isn't a lot of material she gets to. There isn't even the lines themselves have no right to be funny, but she makes them funny.
Team is not a funny line.
But then, and when she goes back into the 5, 6, 7, 8 for the second time,
this is literally I think I'm gonna go to my notes and where is it? I have it here somewhere. That's not the one. How is Taylor Swift the best character in this when all she does say is 5, 6, 7, 8?
6, 7, 8. Yeah, and then also when we see Taylor Lautner also makes fun of himself.
Yes,
there's that scene where he says like, no, I feel bad. I have issues with taking my shirt off in front of a camera. This is when Taylor Lautner just came off of making Twilight movies, where all he did was take his shirt off in front of a camera, and that was one of the things everyone remembers.
Yeah,
like,
and the thing with the push-ups, like, that's exactly like that. It's
and those are
funny.
2 people who are way too young and are already in this industry, and I too famous for their age, and then immediately get like a small bit in this movie where they essentially get to make fun of themselves and people like them, but still in a good-natured way. I don't think they're like mean-spirited in that. They're just making fun of types and types that people think they are, and like they do this in like a screen time that must total like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that is an achievement. I think I don't know, like in this case the writer also was on point with that maybe, but they also really make something out of nothing. Like they're just here to make fun of themselves and enjoy the time.
I really wanted more of that, and I think I kind of kept wondering why some of these stories, like I love Jennifer Garner. I don't usually mind Ashton Kutcher. He's just kind of boringly hunky. I mean, now we know he's a massive
creep, and I hate him, which sours this. But
not kind of at that time. So but I didn't really care for their story all that much. I didn't care. Yeah. I strangely didn't care for Topher Grace and Anne Hathaway, even though I really love Anne Hathaway. And I kind of like thought like, oh, was this around the time when everybody started hating Anne Hathaway? And maybe this movie contributed to that. The reason that I think some of these stories I didn't buy, and it has to do with the fact that this is such a well-made movie, because Topher Grace and Anne Hathaway work in like entry-level positions at this firm where Queen Latifah is the boss. Anne Hathaway is a receptionist and also a sex worker. Topher Grace is in the mailroom, and they look like movie stars. Like I just like I sit.
And again, it's LA where every waiter is also an actor.
But this is the thing. This is the reason that actually made me like Taylor Swift so much. Is nobody would ever say that Taylor Swift is not conventionally attractive. She looked like a real person. Taylor Lautner looked like a real person. Yeah. Anne Hathaway looked like the kind of Hallmark heroine that owns a business, right? And she's like it for some reason didn't. I'm not going to rant like all podcast about this, but I really kept trying to understand why I didn't click with this movie when it's really actually completely my kind of thing. Like complicated movies in which stories intertwine and you see reveals and like, oh, you didn't see it. And you kind of see all of them coming. You see coming that Julia Roberts is the kid's mother. You see coming that Ashton Kutcher and Jennifer Garner are going to be a couple. You see coming that the kid is in love with Jennifer Garner. And the only thing you don't see coming is the Bradley Cooper, Eric Dane storyline.
And I remember that had a big moment when I was in theaters. I mean, definitely even more so in 2010, obviously. Like, again, this makes a difference. But yeah, you don't see that bit coming. I wish they could have kissed, but we all know what ratings are like, and this has like a PG, and you don't get a PG if two men kiss in 2010, and I think that's why they didn't, which is unfortunate. But at least there's enough of a tender gesture between them that I believe them.
So the movie I want to see is basically has Topher Grace and Anne Hathaway dressing down, and it has a lot more of Julia Roberts and Bradley Cooper and Eric Dane and the Taylors. And if you give me that and you just make that like 90 minutes, then that's a movie I love.
I think I would have liked it better, like that moment in the end when Jennifer Garner and Ashton Kutcher get together and they're best friends, and it's the whole, obviously it's a Van Harry Met Sally plot, right? Where he realizes sort of like he cares about his best friend in a different way. And then they kiss, and then they have like, this is weird. And I wish they would have left it at that. And then they sort of kiss again, and it's implied that they will probably get together romantically, but I would have liked it for them to at least go, no, actually, this is weird. Let's not do this. We were overreacting because like I found out my boyfriend's cheating on me, etc. That I would have liked. I think what also does work for me is whenever Gary Marshall points to the fact that he also made Pretty Woman, even though he does it one time too much. But one of the bits they take from that is that voiceover radio host version, like that is just comes in the beginning and the end. That's taken from Pretty Woman. But what I also like about that is that it is that sort of a bit of an ironic break at the end, which would have also worked for Ashton Kutcher and Jennifer Garner, to go against sort of the expectation when he's like, and the three little words that all of us want to hear, let's get naked. Like, at least have some of that stuff in there. And I think it could have been ballsier with some of that, because there's some ideas in there, and then it feels like they take the conventional route after all. And I think had they not done that, it much better.
As a framing mechanism, I thought, because it starts off with that, right? It starts off with the narrator guy, and I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a framing mechanism. It's going to like tie this all together, and it kind of doesn't really do very much. Like it literally comes in at the beginning and at the end, and kind of here and there. I think in the middle, I forget, and I wish that had been part of. I wish the person who is the narrator had been part of the story. That would have been like satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the problem also is that, like, I don't even mind that all these famous people are in there, but then some of them are just not used at all. Someone like Kathy Bates is not used.
Like in one scene, I think. Or two.
I think she has two, but it's clearly like she worked for an hour. And like, I mean, okay, no setting up sets takes longer, but this was a 1 hour day and it wasn't a long day for her. But like it, it's just, I think, cutting down the storylines and then focusing on some of them would have made this better. Like, had we gotten more, like, gay football player coming out, again, it's a fucking radical story you could have done more with, especially in a rom-com. There's
if you'd done 8 stories, if you'd done this in, like, the Richard Curtis, Love Actually, that would have been one of the 8 stories. And probably you could have emphasized a little more. Queen Latifah has basically not a storyline. She is Anne Hathaway's boss, and when Anne Hathaway is doing her sex work basically on company time, she's cool with it, which is like, okay, cool, didn't see that happening. And then in the end, she does it herself.
Queen Latifah, because Tawfiq Reis was kind of an asshole about finding out that Anne Hathaway is a sex worker, and then sort
that was one of the stupid things. This is.
If you made Pretty Woman, why in like 100 years later, literally in movie years, that's 100 years later, are you less progressive about sex work in 2010? And I mean, I know that's not how it works, right? Like, there was a moment in the 90s when we were more progressive about sex than we are in 2010, and you can feel that in that storyline.
Yeah, it's my notes are, why is phone sex a break-upable offense for a 2-week relationship, even if you're from Indiana, unless you're actually Mike Pence? That was my...
Although I have to say, one of the best line deliveries comes from a woman that I don't know is anyone. Maybe she's one of Gary Marshall's relatives because he quips him in his movies. But when Anne Hathaway's on the phone and she forgets about the time because she was like, she hooked up with Topher Grace, and she says she's out in the street taking one of the calls because she's on the time now where she has to take them. And it's like, oh, do you want to have a threesome? And there's like a middle-aged woman next to her holding her dog or cat, and it's like in a robe, and it's just like, it's 8 a.m. or whatever. And she's like, well, if he says yes, I need 5 minutes to change.
It's the I'll have what she's having.
Like she's like, it's so like the line delivery is like spot on.
Yeah. And which, I mean, again, it's a Gary Marshall movie. It could have been he can direct, much better.
And there's so many actors in there who can actually act. He did have the good sense of putting bloopers in the end credits. I have to say, we were a society once. We once did this. That makes everyone feel better, even if the film was mediocre. We need to bring this back. Where are my bloopers in the credits?
Like Julia Roberts take off on her famous scene from Pretty Woman, which is also pretty funny.
Oh, have you ever been here, Rodeo Drive? Yes, big mistake, huge.
Which is also endears Julia Roberts to you because she's not above making fun of that.
No, of course, and I mean, so it's not like they didn't have anything to work with. Or Taylor and Taylor going, yes, hi, I'm Taylor, and yes, I'm Taylor too. We know this is confusing, and I mean. Obviously now, like, we also have to say, like, sort of for all the Swifties listening, fully aware, Taylor Lautner is the one good ex she has. that she's apologized to and not the other way around, who's supported her and is now married to also a tailor. And all three of them love this and make fun of it all the time. So, like, I think that works even better knowing that even though they broke up shortly after this, like, we can still like Taylor Lautner. We can still like Taylor and Taylor.
Marley and Marley, Taylor and Taylor. So.
And also what really surprised me as someone who actually knows some of these things now about Taylor Swift, there's that bit where she puts her lucky number on this shirt and it's 13. And like there's a whole like Taylor Swift lore thing where 13 is a lucky number because it's her birthday. And it really surprised me that like 14 years ago, she was obviously already starting to like do this like stuff, like the lore, I guess, build that lore about herself that early on in her career for something. She might not have intended it as much, or I don't know if that has to do with the film and this is why we do, like, I don't know, but it completely took me by surprise to see this in there. And I was just like, okay, kudos to you, you know what you're doing.
Which actually I thought was going to be like a conflict thing between them. Like she doesn't get him, she puts her number on the jersey, not his, and then nothing is made of that, which is again a little bit of wasted potential with those two.
Yeah, but also like when he trips, when he like they're filming him, he's a track runner and he like trips and she's like, "Walk it off, babe. You're still hot. You're still hot." It's just again like we should have had more.
Yeah, again, it's genuinely one of the like this is a movie you should watch, and you should watch it for the few scenes in there that are genuinely funny and that are genuinely kind of heartwarming. And they may not be the same scenes for you that they were for me or were for you. Yeah, as a general.
Again,
kind of
I think it's I don't know. It probably has grown on me. I do think it's much better than New Year's Eve. It's
we're gonna have to do that now.
Need some it's called Happy New Year. I'm sorry. Or at least in Germany it was. But like it's if you need something to entertain yourself on a February 13 while you're drinking a whole bottle of red wine, that's probably still gonna be fine. Also, the relatable, we hate Valentine's Day party, even though Jessica Biel ends up dating Jamie Foxx. But it's
fun. It's funny, yeah. And there's a nice cameo when Ashton Kutcher runs up to Jennifer Garner at the airport, which is such a romantic comedy scene, which doesn't go the way that these things usually go. He first walks up to a counter at Southwest, and the guy at the counter, and I kept thinking I know this person, he's the dad from 10 Things I Hate About You, which is also obviously... I feel like that's intentional. I feel like there's a bunch of things in there that are intentional.
He's been in things. What is the actor's name?
This is the one that I did not write down.
Yeah, I mean, there's hardly any faces in this who are not famous. And most of them are more famous now than they were back then. And some people are just outright legends. Like, again, Shirley MacLaine is in this. I cannot stress this enough. And Kathy Bates. But yeah, I mean, I get why it fell flat. They could have done so much more with this. I don't know if this film had a stupid tagline. It had a love story, more or less. And I'm like, yeah, good film, more or less.
More love story.
I don't know.
It's again, like it's not something you shouldn't watch. It's just something that after the way that it is talked about by people, I kind of was expecting more.
I think what's a good thing, now that you know it has an 18% Rotten Tomatoes, at least, with the critics. If you go in expecting that, you will probably like it.
You probably like it's. There are certainly worse movies. I mean, we watched a bunch of actually good Hallmark movies, but like a lot of those movies are like obviously much worse than this. If
you can sit through a lot of the older Hallmark films, you will not be offended by this. There's way too many good actors in this. And also chemistry between not necessarily all of them, but like it's there, it exists. It's just, again, it's definitely one of the more like you can forget about this film kind of forgettable films. I mean, I mean, sort of like the holiday, I guess. It's like in terms of holidays we have throughout the year. Valentine's Day is one where, you know, some people seem to care about it, but if you're really thinking about it, it doesn't mean anything. And in that sense, it's definitely just a meta commentary on how little Valentine's Day actually means, if you ask me. But yeah.
Yeah, the movie felt like the equivalent of one of those restaurants that has like, you know, Greek food and also Mexican food and also Thai food and also Italian, and they will make sandwiches if you ask them. It's entirely possible that you can get really good food there, but like a lot of it just is kind of, it's very slapped together. And yeah, it just, my gripe with it is it kind of didn't have very much to say. The thing that it had to say, it said in like 2 scenes, and it had Ashton Kutcher in way too much of the movie. Which,
yeah, especially now, it's the first time that I've seen it since I've heard too many things about Ashton Kutcher's past with various women and his current wife, that it's sort of like, yeah, I don't need him on my screen anymore.
Also, weird music cues throughout. Can we talk about the music in this movie? I was commenting on this when Topher Grace and Anne Hathaway are introduced, and I just kept thinking, why is the SimCity music playing over this? And then Carrie, my partner, who has been playing the I think it's the Hello Kitty video game, and she's like, why is the Hello Kitty music playing on this? It's basically video game waiting music.
I honestly could not tell you what's going on with the music. I mean, the only thing I know about the music is that obviously there's a Taylor Swift song on the soundtrack, A Call Today is a Fairy Tale. 2 of them, actually,
yeah. But still, the soundtrack is another one of those things. It has 2 Taylor Swift songs on it. It has a bunch of classic on it. It still kind of manages to be a middling soundtrack. Like, there are bad movies with soundtracks you put in. This is just kind of
because
there.
It was 2010, and now I could just stream it on Apple Music and don't have to spend any like extra money. But I did, I think, buy it digitally already. But I did buy it back then because it was like, oh well, there's the 2 Taylor Swift songs. There's some of that, and it seemed fine. But like listening to it, yeah, they could have even done a lot more with that. Like, yeah.
So, my one fun fact, which I realized because I was watching the credits, is that they show a Love Actually poster in this at some point, and there is an actual note in the credits after the, you know, like, no animals were harmed in the making of this movie. Love Actually poster licensed from like whatever, like, was it Working Title Films or something, which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah,
must be, if it's
of course you do that, but it just feels like, you know, like tons of posters also, are in tons of films. Idea
for this film licensed, air quotes, from Richard Curtis.
It's basically like, no, Richard Curtis let us have the poster, so we're okay taking this idea. And to be fair, like, the story of, like, there are several stories that are interconnected that are about love is not the most original thing in the world, so it's not like it belongs to Richard Curtis. I honestly wouldn't
mind that. It's just like, again, there's so much wasted potential, I think, is the problem. Like, there was so much, again, you could have gone against the grain with the storylines. You could have gotten a lot more out of all of these talented actors, and that's just the thing. I do like that, like, one of the good things about it, I think, is the location. You can do this with LA. Obviously, it's also convenient for, again, getting all these people to sign on. But they do make use of LA. They could have even made more use of it. But I mean, we have some beach, like Eric Dane lives probably somewhere Venice, Malibu. But we have the Venice canals, which are legitimately beautiful. And we have some scenes there, like a few of them. And I mean, you probably could have found even more places. As someone who's actually, like, started to like LA, I know a lot of people hate LA, especially people living in LA, but I think they do a good job of, like, being in different parts of the city and making it look different. Again, Hollywood Forever Cemetery, some of these locations.
Yeah, they're selling you on LA. I'm you know, not disinclined to go to LA after watching this movie. Yeah. It also they're selling me on 2010s old technology because Jennifer Garner's Nokia phone looked pretty cool, and I don't know what that says about me or the movie, but
I mean,
there you have it.
I know you. You already like Nokia phones before watching this, so that's not.
That's true, but I haven't really thought about them in probably 10 years. So
That's not true. I've talked to you about Nokia phones repeatedly. Don't fool our audience.
I'm just trying to think if that's in connection to whether they can be used as a hammer, and if so, how many times.
Yeah, so do you have a fake tagline?
Yeah, my fake tagline, we already basically mentioned it. My fake tagline is 14 is a lot of storylines, Gary. Which
I have to back you on that. I didn't really think, but that's also what I would go for. I mean, and since it's a love story, more or less, I would go for less.
Less would be more.
Less would be more. I mean, I don't think we have to debate whether or not it's a rom-com, and I think most of these storylines are rom-com storylines, maybe except for mother-son, but like it's again trying to showcase different types of love, a bit like love actually, but that's not the issue. But
no, it's a rom-com, and it is at times genuinely funny, and it is at times genuinely romantic. If you just want a moment of funny and a moment of romantic, go watch the movie on Valentine's Day.
If you want to get drunk by yourself on Valentine's Day, you can put this on in the background and then laugh at Taylor Swift and Taylor Lautner making fun of themselves.
She's on the dance team, Sabrina.
5, 6, 7, 8. I think on this note we should end the podcast.